Hi guys, and welcome to this unbox, overview and in-depth review of this newly received Kickstarter backed campaign watch, the Atowak Ettore Drift Wandering Hour watch. So without further ado, let's get it all out of the box and see what we've got. Quick overview of the packaging: sturdy cardboard box, very nicely supported, and a nice leather style case. So let's get it out and take a look. The box itself is a really nice design faux leather capsule, a time capsule perhaps. Nicely shaped, it's elegant, it's a lovely presentation box, really nice. And we have a simple hinge lid with a magnetic latch to close. Opening this and holding it open reveals the watch and a little pocket, and in this little pocket we have the international guarantee card and a set of little instruction booklet, which I've had a brief look at, and it does cover the operating instructions. Of course, the main event, what we're really here to see, is the watch. So we'll pop this off its little cushion, lift that out of the case, and we'll put this aside. And there's the first quick overview of the watch. It still, of course, has its wrapping on. One thing I'm going to very quickly cover while the protective wrapping is on the watch, just occurred to me, is the measurements. So I'm going to take my vernier calipers here and obviously take advantage of the fact that the wrapping is on the watch. And the case height is 41 millimeters. The lug to lug is 46 millimeters, and the case width is 46 millimeters without crown and 50 millimeters width. So that is quite large, but as with all watches, the actual size measured versus how it looks on the wrist can be very different. So obviously we will see what that looks like on the wrist momentarily. And for those interested, the lug width is 24 millimeters. You can see, in addition to the case wrapping, it also has a protective cover over the exhibition case back, where you can see the very nicely decorated, I have to say, Miyota 9015 automatic movement. We've got a very nice, beautifully finished, polished on the front, brushed on the side, with a coating, a DLC coating. You often hear this referred to, which stands for diamond-like coating, which is like a sort of ceramic finish. Or a PVD is another you are likely to hear regarding this type of coating. Very nicely finished all around. The strap is a leather strap with branding. It feels very good quality. The crown is on the left hand side rather than this side, and it does protrude quite a bit, but if you're a typical left wrist wearer like I am, just wriggle that one down my wrist a moment there, and you're wearing it on the wrist, of course, that crown is not going to protrude and be in the way. That is something that could be potentially uncomfortable or awkward if you are a right wrist wearer. Something to bear in mind, but as a left wrist wearer, I can't see there being any problem whatsoever with that, with the placement of that. It's perfectly fine, and of course it's not going to catch anywhere. As said, if you're a right wrist wearer, there's the possibility that it could dig into your hand when worn this way around. So let's just try and put that, let's say you would wear it around about there. So there is a slight possibility that it could dig into your hand a little bit when you pivot your hand, but it's not too prominent. The edges are not sharp or anything like that. The winding is beautiful. The hand winding, that's buttery smooth. That is so smooth. This is the first time I've actually looked at a watch with the newer Miyota 9015 movement. I'm a big fan of Citizen and by extension Miyota movements, which of course are Citizen's movements. One thing I would have liked to have seen on it is a running seconds recorder. Obviously no calendar works, that doesn't bother me in the slightest. I like watches without calendar works. I like the practical aspect of a calendar, a date window, but I like the elegance of a watch without a calendar. I think it's very nice. The exhibition case back and the outer edge of this, which is probably difficult to see with this lighting and with the fact that it's black coated, says Atowak Ettore Limited. The Ettore logo, the AK there, automatic and 3 atmospheres water resistant. Handling the watch feels a little awkward at first with a left-hand crown, so unless you have a watch with a left-hand crown and you're used to winding and time setting, this feels a bit strange. The initial desire is to flip it around so that you can wind it conventionally like so, and then pull and set the time, but obviously that's a little tricky when you're looking at the time upside down, and quite handy with it being on the left hand side because it's naturally a clockwise rotation when you're operating it from the left hand side, which of course would be an anti-clockwise rotation if it was on the other side. But that's something that I'm sure I'll get used to very quickly. Winding it feels kind of awkward with my left hand, but I am right-handed, so again that might be something that comes much more naturally to a left-handed person. So what we're going to do now is pop the watch on the time grapher, and as mentioned in the previous review, remembering to place the crown on the microphone, which is this side of the fixed portion, which is the most sensitive. It's attached directly to the movement and will pick up the vibrations best. And we'll do the readings as follows: dial up, dial down, pendant down or 9 high, pendant right or 6 high, and then pendant up or 3 high, and pendant left or 12 high. Obviously in this case the pendant is actually on the opposite side, but the principle still applies, hence the use of the numbers as well as the letter designation. So the watch is fully wound, it's fresh out of the box, the first wind after it's been sat in a box for however long since being cased and tested. I'll go ahead and start the time grapher and stop talking so it doesn't pick up any ambient background noise, and we'll see how it performs. So that's the time grapher results. Fresh out of the box, first wind, remembering of course that all movements, whether brand new or just freshly rebuilt after a service and oiled, need a period of time to bed in and settle into a rhythm, just like any mechanical device does. But the results out of the box are very, very good. So full wind, and we had a maximum amplitude of 265 degrees in dial-up, a minimum amplitude of 241 degrees in pendant right, or 6 high. And just for perspective, for citizen movements, much like Seiko movements, that is perfectly fine, acceptable and par for the course. Seiko and citizen movements, the Japanese movements, tend to use lighter components and like to run at lower amplitudes. It's perfectly normal for them to do that. Vintage Seikos you will often see quite happily running around 240 degrees. Brand new Seikos around 260 similarly. There are exceptions with some movements, but the vast majority that does apply to, and it's the same with the citizen Miyota movements also. So the amplitude is perfectly fine there. We had a maximum gain of plus 18 seconds and a minimum of -1, giving us a delta of 19 seconds. That's the widest variation between all of the positions. The positions tested were dial up, dial down, pendant down and pendant right. These are the 4 minimum that really should be tested. I always test in all 6 whenever I service a watch, just for completeness essentially. And it allows you to make any little adjustments to the balance and check for potential problems. Dial up and dial down, for example, should always be very, very similar in performance, similar amplitude and similar gain or loss. And if there's a difference there, that suggests a potential problem with end shake or with the pivots. But without boring you further with the details of that, dial up, dial down and pendant down all performed at a plus 15 to plus 8 maximum and minimum. Pendant right showed the biggest difference with a -1. Ordinarily, this is the kind of error that you would like to throw out to the position referred to as pendant left or 12 high, because it's the least likely position for a watch to be in when worn at any point. And that's any watch, whether it's left wrist or right wrist. However, it's well within specifications. I'm not concerned about that, and how it wears on the wrist and the gain or loss accordingly will be a much more important factor here. And the immediate problem with wearing it on the wrist and taking the timing results is that it doesn't have a seconds hand. So unfortunately, it will be very hard for me to determine how many seconds are gained or lost on the wrist over a course of days. So what I will do, as with any watch, I will wear this now straight for a few days, which is always nice to do with a new watch. It's the honeymoon period, as it were. I will set the time. It's a hacking function movement, so I can set the time very precisely right at the 0, and I will wear this for the next 4 or 5 days straight, at which point I will check to see if there's any obvious or noticeable gain or loss. Just before the close-ups and the wrist shot, I thought this would be quite interesting. This is a Seiko 6138 bullhead chronograph, which I'm currently working on. Obviously, as you can see, the movements out of the case. That's because it is at the moment in bits and awaiting cleaning, and that's part of it that you can see there. And I just wanted to do a case comparison size to show that the shape of this case is somewhat deceptive. Now, if you put them side by side like that, this looks quite large in that dimension, which it is. But if you put this case like this, and then if I lift this and place this over the drift without trying not to scratch it, of course, if I sit that there, you can see that that's actually about the same size. It's almost exactly the same dimensions. It's just differently positioned, like so. So it is a very deceptive size. While it looks rather large, it's really not as large as you would expect. And the watch that I happen to be wearing at the moment, just as a further comparison, is this Hamilton chronograph, which again, as you can see, is, you know, it's quite a chunky watch in its own right, and it doesn't look particularly smaller than this watch. I just thought that would be interesting to see. Watch swap time, and let's see how this looks on the wrist. Let's pop off screen for a second. Excuse me while I just do this. And the first thing I notice, which is quite nice to see and unusual for me, is that I'm not on the last hole of the strap. I'm actually on the third hole of the strap there, so there's plenty of adjustment. I don't recall the size of my wrist off the top of my head, but I will measure that and let you know, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at. Normally, with most watches on a leather strap, I'm typically on the last hole of the strap, and in one or two cases I've had to punch an extra hole. And there we can see what the watch looks like on the wrist. We've got the slightly unusual side profile, as you can see, and the crown protruding at the back there, but that doesn't actually interfere with anything. It doesn't hit anything, it doesn't bend, it doesn't feel uncomfortable. The case sits very, very comfortably on the wrist because in essence it's just the stainless steel back with the exhibition crystal, which is sitting on your wrist. The rest of it is actually sitting proud. The curved front face and the bezel there is very nicely shaped so that as you bend your wrist, that feels perfectly comfortable, nothing's catching. And I don't know about you guys, but I think that looks really, really lovely. It's a little bit unusual, and it's really, really nice. It's something different from the norm. Watch cases wise, in my collection, I'm actually pretty boring. I'm not a big fan of square cases. I do have a Reverso, which I adore. I love it. And that is the one true exception in terms of design. I think it's the most beautiful watch design ever created. It's just utterly gorgeous. And I love the shape of that. But I'm not a big fan of square cases in general. The tank style cases, for example. Really don't like those at all. So the majority of my watch collection are round dials like this one. And it's very unusual for me to go for something oddly different like this Veron familiar design. I'm not sure where I've seen that sort of shape before. It's very unusual for me to go for something like this, but I like it. It's a little bit different. I feel like I'm being quite daring. I do like my straps a little bit loose. Same with bracelets. I like to be able to slide them up and down a little, and I really don't like a watch that sort of digs into the wrist. It's a personal preference thing, and I do like them to sort of sit when my arm is hanging over the knuckle, the bone as it were there. I don't like seeing my watches up there. It just doesn't look right to me. Again, personal preference, but that's by the by. That's just watches in general. That's not anything to do with this particular one. So even down there over the knuckle section, the bone there, again, very comfortable. It's not catching anything when you flex your wrist, which is nice. As said, if you wore it on the right wrist, it might be a little bit of a problem with regards to the crown sticking out there, because it is quite low down, as you can see, and that might dig in. It's certainly not in danger of breaking off because it's very nicely fitted. Again, you'll see that in the close-ups, but it could dig into your hand a little, perhaps, but it is very smooth, and I don't think that would really be a problem. I might actually try wearing it on the right wrist for a little while and see how that feels. In this section, we're going to take a close-up look of the watch itself, and just a close-up of the strap there with its signed PVD coated buckle. Very nice, well padded strap with contrasting stitching, nicely finished suede type material underneath on both sides and likewise signed. Really good quality strap, quick release spring bars for quick strap changes, which is a nice touch, and it's just really nicely finished. It's very good. Very nice strap overall. The case itself, this section here with this line that goes around, is signed with the name Atowak, and this is brushed, as is the thin bezel that goes around the glass there. The bevel is polished, which hopefully you can see, And then the flat sides of the case, if I just try and focus on that for you, are also brushed. Very, very nicely done. Very fine detailed brushing all around. It's really nicely finished. As well as that, the lugs have a twin finish. There's an inner line with a sort of sandblasted matte type finish, and then the outer section which is polished, and then the upper part of the lug is brushed. The crown has this logo on, which I am assuming is representative of Atowak. It's like a spoked wheel, a gear perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. It's quite a nice crown. It's quite bulky. Bulky looking rather. It looks like it sticks out quite a bit, but it's not intrusive. It's not uncomfortable. It doesn't catch you. It's good and easy to grip for winding and for hand setting. The back portion of the case, which screws onto the front, as you can see, is highly polished. And then you have the PVD coated stainless steel case back with sapphire crystal exhibition window and sapphire on the front. You can see the back of the dial there has a almost like a Côte de Genève kind of effect. It's actually a shaped back piece, which is really nice and contrasty, and you can see there as you move it through the light. Triple pointed arms have a really nice rough textured sandblast type finish. I'll show you that up close. So up close and personal, you can see we've got Ettore, Automatic and Atowak, and you can see the brushed finishing. Where the writing is here on these sections, these are angled, textured with a little bit of shape to make them more interesting. You've got the brushed bezel which runs around, and then the gloss bevel of the case. Very, very nicely done. All these numbers are loomed, individually loomed, really nicely finished, all in register, no smudging, no nasty sort of smudging or marks. And then the same with all of these triple arms, of which there are 4. All the numbers and the pointers are loomed additionally, so you can see precisely where that's pointing when you're checking the time at night or in the dark. That pretty much covers the dial. There seems to be an awful lot going on, but in reality it's quite a simple display. But I'm just going to rotate that for you under magnification so you can kind of see the whole thing coming around. Now, unfortunately, because of the design, the way that these switch over, the way that these triple arms rotate, happens over here underneath this Atowak logo. So that's a little bit of a shame in a way, because it means that you can't actually see the change flipping over. It's a relatively simple system, and obviously those who know will know that this is really Urwerk inspired, with a much less complex system of hour changing. They use rotating cubes, very, very complicated system with hundreds of parts per movement. So this is much more simplified, but still very nice, very interesting, and something a little bit different. So as you can see there, very nicely finished triple arms, and as these rotate, these get flipped over behind this hidden piece and display the next number in the sequence. Flipping over to the back and just giving that a little polish, because this high gloss black finish does really pick up fingerprints. I should perhaps have worn gloves. You can see the serial and the number 114 of 500. This of course is a limited run of 500 pieces. You can see the difference in the stainless steel screw down case back with the coating on there with a brushed finish, and you can see the slight shade difference there as well compared to the gloss of the case. This has a sapphire crystal exhibition window. We've got a black coated oscillating weight with the Atowak logo, and then this sort of diamond dust encrusted looking weight on the end of it. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, but that is pretty much standard Miyota 9015. That's how they look from pictures that I have seen of the movements in question. For what's considered a relatively sort of entry-level movement, because people tend to bunch this in with the NH35, it's actually a bit more expensive than the NH35, and you can see why. It's much more heavily jewelled and it's much more nicely finished. You can see you've got the Côte de Genève on the main plate and on the balance cock there, and a really sort of nice matte finish all over the remainder of the movement. This is automatic winding, and it's a unidirectional automatic winding. As you can see, it rotates very freely in one direction, indicating that it's free spinning, and the other direction takes a little bit more effort to move it, as you can see. And I have never found that to be a problem with Miyota movements in the past. They wind very efficiently despite them being unidirectional. We'll see how this goes after 4 or 5 days on the wrist, and see how we're looking regarding gain or loss of time. Let's try and get that weight around there so you can see that lovely finishing on that plate. Really, really nice. You can see jewelled barrel arbor there as well. Always a good sign. And the more jewels the better. Everything very clean internally. So these have obviously been handled and cased up in a nice clean environment, which is also something that's nice to see. A view of the crown from the underside. You can see how that crown tube sticks out quite a bit, but it sits very nicely flush. If I pull that crown out to the time setting position, push that back, and you can see that sits really, really nicely flush. It certainly looks more impressive than the price point would suggest of the Kickstarter campaign, considering I've bought watches around this price point from micro brands and such, which don't look quite as nicely finished. There's all the details of the watch. The only thing required now is for me to set the time, wear the watch continuously for 4 or 5 days or so, and see how that time's on the wrist. And then I will come back and film an update, obviously for you guys. That will be a mere few seconds and you'll see that. You know that thing where you get something new and you want to take it apart to see how it works, or just to show somebody how it works? Well, and to the final part of the review, I have worn this watch solidly for 6 days straight, almost a full week. And upon checking the time difference, it was set at the start of the week. It was wound and set, and was removed a couple of times for certain duties at work, which you really don't want to be wearing a watch for. And other than that, it has been on the wrist the whole time. With checking the time at the end of the six-day period, coming into the 7th day when I swapped it out, which was just coming up to Christmas Day, as it happens. Was when I was swapping it for my chosen Christmas Day watch, which is something that's rather special to me. I checked the time, and as well as I could discern with the aforementioned caveats regarding the pointer system on this, it had a gain of approximately 30 seconds over a 6-day period. And that is to say it was in between, that's 30 seconds fast incidentally. According to my phone clock, which I used to set it initially, and it was between the minute marker it should have been on and the following one, almost exactly halfway. This is not the watch to wear if you want to the second accuracy in terms of readability. And in terms of readability at night, while I'm on that subject, the loom does fade relatively fast, making it very hard to read at night. While the numbers are quite clear, and of course because of the way that it's laid out, they're fairly easy to read. But the number on the pointer, not so much once the light has faded a little bit. If you've fallen asleep, woken up during the night, you have a look, it's very hard to read the number without having another light source. I will show you a loom shot before we finish this review. On the subject of readability, it's not the easiest to read with great accuracy because the minute counter only covers 1/3 of the dial portion. And because of that, the minute counter segments are crammed together much more tightly than would normally be the case with any other watch. But it is a fun watch when all's said and done. This is not something that's designed for ultra high precision like a pilot's watch or anything like that. It's a great fun watch. It's something a little bit different, and it gets some interested glances and comments, as I have discovered. I like it. I still like it a lot. It would be, I couldn't recommend it as a daily wear if accuracy was definitely a thing, but it's a great fun piece and it's nice and sporty looking as well. The strap, I think I mentioned earlier in the video, it's leather. It's not actually marked leather, so I presume it is actually some kind of leather substitute, but it has stood up perfectly fine over a week of use. It's good and thick, it's nice and supple and flexible already, and I can't see that being a problem in continued use and wear. The movement has been chugging along very, very nicely indeed, and I do have a little bit of a treat because I just couldn't resist doing a little bit of disassembly on this to show how this whole wandering hour complication operates. So in summary, it's a great fun watch. I really like it. It's great value for the price. We've got a nice high beat, nicely decorated Miyota movement, which performs very well. And I'm a big fan of Miyota movements. I do like them. I think Citizen, who of course are Miyota, are a little bit sort of pushed to the background because of the popularity of Seiko, which is a little bit of a shame because they make some stellar watches and movements to boot, as anybody who's a Citizen fan out there knows. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is any watch perfect? I mean, there are some that come close in terms of what I consider perfect for a watch, but of course everybody's perfect is different. Is it fun? Yes. Is it good value? Yes, I do think so. It's very nicely made, very nicely finished, and it's just a lovely, fun, quirky timepiece. I really like it. So I am now going to show you a quick loom shot just to give you a bit of an idea of how that looks, and then we'll move over to a detailed shot of the wandering hour complication for you. So here's the technical bit, the bit that does the magic, as it were. So you can see you've got the forearm pieces here. I'm going to pull out the stem. I'm just going to wiggle that back and forth, and you can see there's actually a little bit of play. We're looking at the arms on this side, incidentally. Just a tiny little bit of play, which is probably going to equate to about a minute. Maybe a little bit less looking at that, actually. It's not quite as much as I'd thought. But a little bit there. And you can see we've got a cutaway in this circle, and the circle actually maintains those arms, which are free moving, as you can see if you look at this bottom left one and the top left one. You can see they're very free spinning, and it's the circle that actually maintains the position of these tri-arms. And if I turn this so that we're changing the time, you can see there how the whole thing works. And I think that's kind of cool, and I just wanted to share that. And what I'm going to do right now is just leave this running on a little time lapse for you. So enjoy. The only thing that remains to be said now to everybody is thank you for watching this review. It was quite a long one, but I wanted to be as thorough as possible. I will mention that I did put this on the time grapher just to get a second reading after a week of where the results were there was so little difference it wasn't worth filming and showing you that. And of course the on the wrist results equated to, as said, approximately 30 seconds gain in a 6-day period. So thank you to everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it informative, helpful and useful, and we will see you in the next video.